Welcome to my channel Inside True Stories. Maplewood Shores had always been a neighborhood where rules were law, and breaking them was a personal offense. The Homeowners Association was infamous for turning trivial matters into major punishments. A resident was fined $300 for leaving a lawn chair in the driveway after dusk. Another was ordered to repaint their fence because the shade of white was slightly off. The HOA president, Gerald Thompson, was a man who thrived on control. Every decision, no matter how minor, passed through his judgment. Beside him, Vice President Marlene Pierce gleamed with smug satisfaction whenever they could publicly humiliate a neighbor. Residents had learned to obey silently. Fear of fines, lawsuits, and public shaming kept everyone in line. But one man, known for his quiet confidence and love for the outdoors, was about to challenge their authority in a way no one expected. David Miller had lived in Maplewood Shores for nearly 15 years. A widower and father of two, he worked long hours as an auto mechanic. But every weekend, he escaped to the lake at the edge of the neighborhood, a hidden gem tucked behind a cluster of oaks. Fishing was more than a hobby. It was a tradition. His father had taught him as a boy, showing him how to cast a line and wait patiently for a bite. Every moment by the water reminded him of simpler, quieter times. On this sunny Saturday morning, David packed his tackle box, grabbed his favorite rod, and walked down to the lake with his young son, Ethan, at his side. The water shimmered in the early light. Birds called from the trees, and for a brief moment, the world felt perfect. But peace was short-lived. From the edge of the lake, Gerald Thompson and Marlene Pierce appeared, their faces twisted with anger. They stormed toward David, clutching clipboards and HOA rulebooks. "You can't fish here," Gerald barked. "This is private property and you are trespassing." David looked up calmly. "This lake has been part of this neighborhood long before your HOA existed." "I'm allowed to fish here," Marlene sneered. "Allowed? You are breaking the rules. I'm calling 911 if you don't leave immediately." David's hands remained steady as he set his tackle box down. "Calling the police over fishing? That seems extreme," he said. But before he could say more, Marlene pulled out her phone. "I already did," she shouted. "Someone needs to enforce the law." Ethan clutched his father's arm nervously, unsure why the police would be needed for something so simple. Neighbors peered from their windows, whispering in disbelief. David took a deep breath. He had faced challenges before, but never this absurd. Still, he refused to let fear dictate his actions. He began setting up his fishing line, his calmness unnerving Gerald and Marlene. The first act closes with the tension at its peak. The HOA is fully confident in its power. The police are on the way, and David stands quietly, knowing something the HOA does not yet realize. Within minutes, flashing red and blue lights lit the neighborhood lake. Two police officers stepped out of their patrol car, surveying the scene. Gerald Thompson approached them immediately, waving his clipboard. "This man is trespassing and breaking HOA rules," Gerald declared, his voice trembling with indignation. "We demand you take action immediately." The officers raised their eyebrows, exchanging a glance. One of them, Officer Ramirez, approached David with a calm, professional tone. "Sir, we received a call about a trespasser fishing here. Can you explain the situation?" David smiled politely, holding up his hands. "This lake is part of the neighborhood, yes, but it's never been privately restricted in a way that would make fishing illegal. I'm exercising my right to fish here peacefully." Gerald's face grew red. "No, you are violating the rules. This is private property, and you will be fined." The police officers glanced at each other again. They were trained to respond to criminal activity, not HOA disputes. "Do you have any documentation proving your right to be here?" Officer Ramirez asked. David nodded and retrieved an old property map and deed he had brought with him for safety. "Here are the official records. The lake and surrounding land are not owned by the HOA, but fall under public or previously deeded rights." Gerald and Marlene scoffed, confident that the officers would side with them. "This man is trying to defy the community," Marlene insisted. "You can see it for yourselves. He's refusing to leave." Others had begun to gather quietly, curious about the commotion. Whispers spread quickly. Did they really call 911 over fishing? I've never seen them so angry. Maybe he's right. Gerald waved them off. Don't listen to him. The rules are clear. But as David calmly handed over his documents, a subtle tension began to ripple through the crowd. For years, they had watched the HOA bully neighbors, and here was someone standing up without fear, facing police and refusing to back down. Despite the HOA's aggression, David remained composed. He set up his fishing rod and motioned to Ethan to do the same. "Don't worry about them," he said to his son. "Sometimes people try to control what they don't understand. We just have to stay calm and know the truth." Officer Ramirez carefully examined the documents. "These appear to be valid property and public access records," he said quietly to his partner. "Legally, he's allowed to fish here." Gerald and Marlene's faces fell. Their confidence began to crack. This was not the simple intimidation they were used to. The man they expected to cower before their authority was calmly asserting a right they had assumed belonged to them. Whispers from the neighbors grew louder, many of them now watching David with admiration. The once unquestioned power of the HOA was beginning to feel fragile. The tension at the lake had reached a boiling point. Gerald Thompson and Marlene Pierce stood stiffly, clutching their clipboards, their faces red with frustration. The gathered neighbors whispered anxiously, unsure how the confrontation would end. David calmly stood, holding a folder of documents he had brought for just this moment. He motioned to Officer Ramirez, "Please, feel free to examine these. They include historical deeds, maps, and public access records. Every page shows the lake is legally open to residents for fishing. It has never been privately restricted by the HOA." Officer Ramirez began reviewing the papers, nodding slowly. The other officer, Officer Lee, looked at Gerald and Marlene. "Ma'am, sir, it looks like this gentleman has the legal right to be here." Gerald's jaw tightened. "That can't be. We've been enforcing the rules for years." David shook his head. "Rules do not make laws. You have been pretending to own what you never did. Your fines, your threats, they hold no legal weight here." Murmurs from the neighbors grew louder. Some clapped softly. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Marlene's smug demeanor collapsed. But we're the HOA. We make the rules." David's voice remained steady and calm, carrying over the lake and reaching every neighbor. "Authority built on fear is not authority at all. You have abused your position to intimidate and control people. But the law and truth are on my side." He held up the deed to the lake and surrounding land, the official county seal glinting in the sun. "This is the proof. This lake is legally accessible to residents like me. Any attempt to remove me or fine me is not just wrong. It is unlawful." Gerald's face turned pale. He looked around at the neighbors watching him, realizing that the empire he had built on fear was crumbling. Neighbors began speaking up. "We've always known this HOA went too far. Finally, someone stands up to them. We should all be allowed to fish here." David smiled at the growing support but remained focused. He knelt beside Ethan, who held a fishing rod, and whispered, "Remember this, son. Sometimes people will try to stop you from doing what's right. But truth and patience always win." By the end of the confrontation, the police confirmed David's right to be on the lake. Gerald and Marlene had no choice but to step back, humiliated in front of the entire neighborhood. With the police confirming David's right to fish, Gerald Thompson and Marlene Pierce were left speechless. Their threats, fines, and arrogant declarations had all crumbled in front of the entire neighborhood. Word spread quickly. Other residents, long intimidated by the HOA's iron grip, began speaking out. Several came down to the lake to congratulate David and reclaim their right to enjoy the water. The power of fear that the HOA had wielded for years evaporated in a single afternoon. Gerald and Marlene had no choice but to retreat to their offices, powerless. Their credibility destroyed. They could no longer enforce unjust rules without risking legal consequences or public backlash. David did not seize power. Instead, he led by example. He encouraged residents to enjoy the lake responsibly, to look out for one another, and to reclaim their neighborhood from fear. He set an example of calm, patient strength, teaching children to fish properly, helping elderly neighbors repair their docks, encouraging community events at the lake where families could gather peacefully. His leadership was not about domination, but about restoring dignity and fairness. One late afternoon, the lake was calm and golden under the setting sun. David and his son, Ethan, sat quietly in their boat, fishing rods in hand. Children ran along the shore, neighbors laughed together, and the oppressive shadow of the HOA had vanished. David smiled, watching Ethan reel in a small bass. "See, son?" he said softly. "Sometimes standing up for what's right means being patient, staying calm, and letting the truth shine through." A few neighbors waved from the dock, grateful and inspired by his courage. David nodded back, knowing that the lake was no longer just a place for fishing. It was a symbol of freedom, justice, and community. The HOA, once feared, had been defeated not by anger or revenge, but by truth, patience, and quiet courage. David's story is a testament that standing up for what's right, even against overwhelming authority, can restore justice and inspire an entire community.